Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the map of Tiny Perfect Things. So, within this movie, we have a time loop film. If people don't know exactly what a time loop film means, you can go on and watch other movies like Mel Gibson's Boss Level. You can go on and watch Groundhog's Day, Happy Death Day, and also you could possibly go on and find Palm Springs that has Adam Sandberg in it, which is also kind of like a time loop movie. So, going into this film, we have it seems at first that we have a guy, Mark, who seems to be going through this time loop to the point of him being able to perfectly time everything to a day where he is to try to go on and do the Bill Murray thing to consistently try to do like a perfect day. But it seems that Mark, after midnight, is to just restart this day no matter what he is to go on and do. So we have Mark that is going on and trying everything that he can possibly think of to get rid of this repeating day over and over again. Mark is to lose the luster of wanting to go to school or class for just how really repetitive it is, and really so that way Mark can go on and enjoy everything else within life, even to the point of him driving a bulldozer around town because he can. And then at one point, Mark is to go on and consistently do this one thing to try to save a girl from falling into this pool. And he then meets a girl named Margaret, who is also suffering from the same time loop. And it's like, oh, hey, like, you're in this too? Yeah. So then all of a sudden it starts to be that both of them are to realize that there are tiny perfect things within this town, and they want to take that time to be able to find this like one-of-a-kind things that are to repetitively happen within this town and figure out how to mark them all down, and then have it to where Margaret is to be talking about this kind of fourth dimensional cube like thing. And because Margaret is much more intelligent than Margaret is more intelligent than Mark is, we have our two characters that are to go their separate ways within the story, and then Mark is to realize just then and there that this wasn't actually his story, it's actually Margaret's story, to kind of know more about her, and eventually have Margaret, who is to be smart enough to much more possibly be able to solve this whole repeated day thing than Mark will. So this is an interesting kind of fun movie. It's kind of like there was also that one repeated day movie that involved Christmas from the guy from Barely Legal. I don't remember what his actual name is, but there is some like repeating Christmas Day over and over again where the kid always consistently gets a basketball for Christmas, and he's like, oh, what is this, Mom and Dad? And then he unwraps it and it's a basketball. It's like, wow. Because he was trying to perform the perfect day and it like spiraled into being the worst. So find that out and check it out. I don't know, eventually at some point. It is what it is. Let me know if there's another repeated day movie that I've probably never heard of, because eventually I would want to go and check that out. Just because I like the repeated day concept. Because it feels like you would have like endless ability to do whatever the F you want. There is no law, there is no nothing, and so you could feel free to eventually pull the Bill Murray Groundhog's Day thing where he knows every single person in town because he can't leave. So, with that said, let's. I've kind of teed up this movie, so right now it's available on Amazon Prime. May not always be the case, but it's a convenient movie for you to be able to see, so hopefully you go on and check it out. I would say that this movie, it's a it's an okay film. Like, I would say that it doesn't feel like there's enough going on in this film, but like compared to some other Repeat of Day movies. But I can see how people can enjoy this film. Some people may like this Repeat of Day movie than others, just because it's fun things that eventually are to be tied into supposedly what is to be the perfect tiny day. So, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into spoilers about this movie. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about this film, this title, this thing that I don't want to consistently repeat because eventually I don't want to F it up. So with that said, let's go on and hopefully be able to somehow be able to talk about a Repeat of Day movie because those are always so easy, right, to review. When you have to go on and mention the little tweaking things that a character does from certain kind of scenes consistently. So with that said, let's go into that double 5-time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this one because it's about the time to say it's spoiler time, spoiler time. It's about the time to get to spoil. I repeated this movie. So let's go into spoiler time. So in the very beginning of this movie, we have Mark, who is to wake up upon this day to eventually repeat everything that his sisters say, calling him a loser, and so on and so forth. And, like, here's the funny thing. There's sometimes in these repeated things that eventually they don't always keep to the same script, it seems. Like, because when Mark is eventually realizing that his sister is not calling him a loser every single time, that's what immediately, like, popped in my brain to just, like, wait a minute. Like, every other take, she's not calling him a loser, and she should have to. I guess, like, little tweakingly things can change somebody to not say something that kind of just pops out of her head. So, Mark goes on and is to immediately tell his dad every crossword answer that he has because Mark has, I guess, done this crossword from before, helping his father finish this out quicker. Mark is to go on and quickly make toast because his father wants toast. And then Mark is to go on and grab this cup thing before it falls. So Mark does not go to school. He doesn't really often, especially go to his algebra school, as we find out within this movie, and because Mark just sucks at math. Eventually, at one point, Mark is to sneak into school to eventually ask his math teacher if there's a possibility that he can break this repeated day. Like, if there is some kind of scientific way of maybe possibly breaking this. And really, Mark is asking all these rando questions that doesn't actually make sense to this math teacher. And the math teacher is to come to a possible conclusion that this kid may need to go on and kind of fly out of the time loop, and maybe that will work. To somehow try to leave the country, and maybe that will somehow, like, drastically change things, which it won't. It won't. So we go on and have Mark, who is to go throughout his town with either a bulldozer or just the ability to walk. And so Mark goes on and is to go throughout his town and is to eventually go to this swimming pool after he goes on and is to talk to this girl named Phoebe who needs directions of where the swimming pool is. So Mark then is to seemingly be intrigued about wanting to possibly figure out a way to get a date with this girl Phoebe, and so Mark is to go on and save her before she falls in by this pool, because she ends up continuing to get pelted with this beach ball all the time and then almost falls into this pool. Mark goes on and consistently saves her, but not every day is perfect. Kind of like how we go on into boss level, where we have Mark Grillo, who at some points is have to perform this kind of jumping kind of thing, and not every time he goes on and does that, he has perfected it, and eventually he is to either die or get injured, or eventually his day is to just be miserable. But that's an action wave repeated day, and I thought that was so cool. Check it out if you like action movies, because some people don't. So Mark goes on to save this girl, and by the end of the day, like, he's really trying to just figure out a way to get this girl to date him, and every single day this girl comes up with a reason. So Mark is like, God, like, he just wants to try to somehow, like, eventually get a girl to date him on this day. It's not going to be like Bill Murray, where Mark can go and get all this information about this girl and then come in the very next day, be like, oh yeah, like, we went to school together, this and that, like, because it won't work. Something like that won't work. So Mark is to consistently go to his friend Henry's house, who is consistently having trouble with this video game, consistently where he dies every single day. No matter what it seems that they go on and do, every single day, Mark is to go on and talk to Henry and mention that, like, hey, like, I want to spit this out quickly. Like, you're in a time loop, and you don't know about it, but I do. And so, like, I have to tell you about this every single day. And so Mark quickly gets that out of the way with Henry, so then Mark can go on and just kind of talk to Henry about kind of what's going on, like, what's the new thing. So, and every single time Henry is to always go on and die because he is to always be outmatched. Come to find out towards the end of the movie, we'll finally have it to where Margaret is to know how Henry is to beat this game, because she has one little like trick that Henry doesn't know about, that she has, like, this, like, trick weapon that can get him through this level and reveal to him the finishing up of this level. And he's like, oh my god, like, I've tried so hard to try to beat this level and it never happens. So, but Henry and Mark at some point, like, in the later, like, repetitive days, Mark even tries to go on and is to do, like, a 2-player and try to beat the level, and still it doesn't work out. So we go on into this film, and so Mark is to consistently go through this repeated day where he is to eventually go to this one diner and is to play the lottery, and he is to win every single time, and he just goes into celebration with all these people that he won the lottery, even though he knew exactly what the numbers were. And so Mark eventually is to also throughout this movie continue to show us little things that he is to go on and try to prevent, or kind of cool little things, and that eventually gets to us having these, like, these perfect little, these tiny perfect things. So we'll get to that in a second here. So Mark is to go on to the pool, and one miraculous day, Mark again is trying to save this girl, and from dropping and getting hit by this beach ball, and this one girl just finally steps in, grabs the beach ball before this girl gets hit, and Mark's like, wait a minute, that's never happened before. So Mark is chasing after who we'll find out is Margaret, and she's going through this same looped day. So Mark is to go on and find out that Margaret was to leave this missing dog paper on the ground, and so Mark tried to call this number, and come to find out the lost dog is not actually Margaret's, it's someone else's. So Mark is talking to Henry about the numbers of steps that he tried to get to find this mystery girl, and that he's consistently been trying to stalk her and figure out where she is, because it's not easy to figure out a person that doesn't have a consistent way about going about their life. Like, he can't time this out perfectly like he can with everyone else in the world. So we have one day where Mark is to somehow be able to run after something and find Margaret by accident. And so Mark, now finally finding Margaret, is to say, like, hey, like, just a quick question, like, you in a time loop? Like, are you like in a he says it more scientifically, but that I go with the common way to say it. And so the girl's like, well, yeah. And so now that the girl has been found, we have Margaret and Mark who spend time together up until a certain time of the day where Margaret needs to go on and go to this hospital. And Mark is thinking that this girl is to consistently be doing something with a guy, or like, because Margaret is to go on and talk about this doctor. And so Mark looks him up, is like, okay, like, this guy is a little old, this is kind of weird. So come to find out, eventually somewhere in the movie, Mark eventually goes to this little kind of part where, or place where everybody's kind of skating and doing these tricks, because that's kind of like the tiny perfect thing moment, where eventually these guys are to fall and hurt themselves every single time. And I guess it's probably always funny, I don't know, for whatever reason. So, and that helps both Mark and Margaret think about all the tiny perfect things that are within this town, and that makes them realize that they need to go and find all of them. But we'll get to that in a second. So Mark is to go on and get injured the one day that he tries going skateboarding and he breaks his arm. So he goes on to realize that Margaret is seeing her mother every night in the hospital, because her mother is to have cancer and she may die after this day is over, hence why Margaret is to keep holding on to this day so often. That she doesn't want the repeating day to break. Where Mark is just like, dude, I want to get out of here. Like, I want to grow old. I want to do this. I want to do that. Because we have them both conflict between one another, where, like, Mark wants to go on and wants to get out of this, and Margaret's like, well, no, like, this is, like, the perfect thing. Like, you can learn anything you want. You can do anything you want. And, like, you have all the time in the world. And Mark's like, no, like, really, like, you don't have all the time in the world to eventually just accomplish everything, because you only have like 24 hours to really accomplish it, and then you're done. So we have Margaret and we have Mark who are starting to collect all of these tiny perfect things within the town. So come to find out, these perfect things in unspecific order of even the movie, we have two people going on and playing like solitaire, and two old people, an elderly couple. And it seems that one of the women is to go on and win at this game. And so after she goes on and wins at this game, she ends up getting up and she ends up dancing. And so that ends up being one of the tiny perfect things to the point where after a number of scenarios, it seems that Mark is to go up with this girl and just start dancing with her, and the old man's like, yeah, yeah. So we also have another perfect thing where Mark and Margaret are to go to this tennis court, and so a guy is to serve this ball, and it smacks against this cooler, and it hits a guy in the head. Like, that is kind of one of the perfect moments. We also had Mark, who was to mention two things that he was to see that was kind of really interesting, and he points them out to Margaret. Like, Margaret and Mark were to see a guy who bumps into another guy, and while this guy was trying to be on his phone, the dog ends up running away with this guy's phone, and they have to chase after him. And there's one guy who has all these chains on his pants, and he's talking to this woman, and all of a sudden, while he's putting this coin in this meter, he accidentally is to pull on one of his chains, and his pants fall down. So the guy is kind of grabbing back up his pants, and is to kind of be humiliated in public. And so that's what kind of starts out the whole them wanting to find these tiny perfect things in town. So so they go on. They start looking for these perfect things. So at one time, a man is to sit on this bench, and weirdly, we have this angel moving company that ends up having this vehicle. So every time this car perfectly stops with this guy in this bench, and it looks like he has an angel wings on the behind of him, and they call that the perfect moment. And there may have been the skate park might have been the perfect moment when they went there. And trying to think if there was anything else. I think there's only quite a few things there. But so we have Mark and we have Margaret who go on and are to kind of take their everyday and kind of do these fun things that only last per mere minutes. Mark and Margaret are to go on and be walking through town, and Margaret just steals this coat and is to just kind of put it on, and they go through the back of this restaurant, which they shouldn't have, and are eventually on this restaurant. And Mark wants to eventually kiss Margaret, and Margaret is just not interested. And eventually everyone is to stop, huh? And Mark is like, oh, you guys will forget about all this tomorrow. So we have Mark and we have Margaret who, the more and more that Mark tries to win over Margaret, the more it's not going to work. And they try all kinds of things. We have Mark who goes on and is to quickly kind of bribe the whole art studio or art department to go on and put this astronaut display in this school. And so both Mark and Margaret go into this kind of astronaut-like environment. And I'm like, how would all this get done in one day? It doesn't quite make sense, but it is what it is. So Mark and Margaret are to eventually be in this spaceship that's made out of cardboard, and are to eventually go and open this door to be out on the moon, where there's this flag there, and there's this supposed astronaut there, and so it kind of looks like they're out in outer space. Both of them are wearing football helmets without the actual kind of front piece on, and they're pretending that they're astronauts for a little bit. And so Margaret is asking Mark, well, how did you do this? He said, well, I bribed the art department. It's like, oh, okay. So eventually, because Mark gets this idea from Henry to eventually have them go on and have Mark continue with the days that he's able to be able to do all these kind of wonderful things to eventually try to win over Margaret, which just really doesn't happen. We have both Mark and Margaret, and so Margaret is to talk about this fourth dimensional cube, and Mark doesn't really know what exactly Margaret is talking about as they're putting money in a bunch of these things around this store, and they're putting them in like certain cards and like certain little like kind of toy horses and stuff like that. So since Mark doesn't know much about math, Margaret is going to go out of her way to help Mark learn algebra, to the point of eventually Mark going on and eventually going one day to school, and it seems that he is to go on and get every single answer right for a guy that barely ever shows up in algebra class. Because eventually Margaret is to figure out a way to help Mark learn algebra or learn math. So, because Margaret is to want to go on and become an astronaut, and what eventually is Mark going to really try to do here? Because he is an artist that doesn't have enough money to actually go to art school. So his dream is kind of crushed, and to the point where every single night of this repeated day, we have Mark who's going home to, of course, his father, Daniel, who's asking him, like, well, hey, like, where do you see your future going? Like, what do you see, like, yourself being in the future? And at one point, we have Mark trying to break it to every member of his family that it's a repeat of days. So, like, he has no future. He has no life. So, Mark goes on and just tells his father, it's like, well, I'm going to be an astronaut. That's in the priesthood. And Daniel's like, wow, so you're going to go to astronaut training and become a priest? Like, that seems a lot of work. And Mark is like, well, like, it doesn't matter because eventually I have no future. This is a repeated day, and eventually you're just going to forget this tomorrow and ask me the exact same thing. So what is the point? So, as well as Mark immediately telling his father that 8 hours from the morning, Daniel is to go on and be eating Rocky Road, which of course he is. By the time that Daniel is at some points asking Mark, like, what is he going to do with his future? So we go on into this story, and so by the time that Mark decides to try to figure out how to go on this plane, and it seems that Mark and Margaret are going together on this plane to leave the country, and Margaret ends up staying and tells Mark, like, well, hey, good luck on what you're doing. So she jumps out of the plane at the last minute, and then Mark's like, oh, I can't go after her. So Mark then goes on and is to try to leave to hope that he can break this pattern, and he doesn't. And so Mark is just stuck there, but Mark realizes that it's not his story, it's Margaret's story, and that she's going to figure this out. So Margaret goes on and is to consistently be with her mother, and is to really just realize that she has to let her mother go and come up with this perfect day. So Margaret goes on and chases every tiny perfect thing and realizes exactly at what time it happens. And so now Margaret is to go on and find this tiny perfect thing and have all these things accumulate together into this this fourth dimensional cube. And so when Margaret is to put it up against this wall to kind of see the shadow of it, she realizes that there is an event that isn't connected together. And so then Margaret is to realize with the map of the town and the time period of the day that something should be happening at 7 o'clock at this pool. And she's like, okay, so there's something that has to happen perfectly there. So Margaret is to go on and speak to Henry and is to figure out the way for Henry to finally beat this game, which gives her the idea of uh, the fourth dimensional cube thing. But we also have Margaret, who is to finally find this lost dog. I guess somehow maybe this dog was connected into this day also, to where like the dog was to uh, not be kind of perfectly timed within this place also, because it seems that the dog was to somehow just wander into this certain location and Margaret grabbed it. So not only are Mark and Margaret dealing with this, but also a dog is, I guess, as well. So we have Mark and we have Margaret, and so hopefully I've kind of like condensed this movie, because man, is there a lot of things to have to remember. Because I'm sure there's a billion things that I forgot about, because it's in the race of just trying to go on and figure all this out. And so we also have moments where Mark is to do things a lot for his family. Mark is to go on and go to his sister's soccer game, where of course they lose 3-0. As Mark is to go on and practice with his sister while playing a baritone. Because a tuba, like, I don't know, it could be baritone or a tuba. It's been a while since I've done band. I want to say it's probably a baritone, because those are pretty easy to do. So, because I've played one, hence why I know the name. Anyways, so we have Mark also going on and asking his father about the book that he's doing, and Daniel all of a sudden jumps up and starts saying all this information about a number of people who were to have died during that whole event. And like, it's kind of interesting because that brings it back to when both Mark and Margaret are thinking about how many people are to have birthdays on this day and how many people probably die on this day. And maybe they could have saved one of them if really they could have figured that out. So, in a justifiable way. Kind of like Bill Murray when he would try to consistently try to save that homeless person, but every single night he would always die, and there's nothing he could do about that. So, we have Mark that is to go to eventually, before his mother goes off to work, he runs off to where her car is, and he hugs her because he rarely ever sees her because she's working. And come to find out, Daniel was to have supposedly quit his job, but what really happened is Daniel was to lose his job because they just told him that they no longer needed him, and so he just kind of buried himself in this novel to try to accomplish this, some Civil War book. So, with all that said, hopefully now almost everything is to be quasi-perfectly aligned in here, because man, is there just a lot of stuff to have to remember from all of this movie. And let me know in the comments below if there's a bajillion things that I forgot, because I'm sure there probably is, because a repeat of day is very difficult to remember everything because of the slight little tweaks. There's a billion times where there's a billion different variations, it seems, even though it's not really a billion, it's probably like 5 or 10, where Mark in his breakfast morning is always like a tweed bit different, but most of the time it seems the same, but it is what it is. So now to that last perfect event. So Mark and Margaret. We have Mark, who is still at this pool by 5 minutes to 6. And I'm thinking, like, how is it they have all the time in the world to get all of this stuff done within one singular day? Like, we had the moment where Mark had drew every single little perfect thing all in this one piece of paper in one day. Um, and he just easily, like, he must have, like, perfectly been able to draw everything to the point of him, like, being able to sketch this stuff all the time. So Mark and Margaret eventually at this pool are to eventually go on and have Mark and Margaret finally kiss, and that is to end their perfect day. We also had the one moment where Mark and Margaret were to find there was one home that was to go on sale for that day, and so there was like nobody really in it, and so Mark and Margaret went into the house and they completely destroyed it. They broke all the furniture. They went on and like destroyed all these pillows. We also had times where when Margaret was driving, she was driving like crazily, like smashing into a bunch of things because Margaret was to say that she wanted to take these repeated days to learn how to drive, and she took this car from her friend. And so Margaret was to go on and consistently bash into all this stuff because for her to not be able to drive perfectly doesn't really matter because it's a repeated day where there's no consequence. So Margaret just kept bashing into everything. Like she would bash into this other car and then bash into all these bikes and then she would just drive off. So I guess there is quite a bit of fun of doing this kind of movie, but man, to have to go through and do a movie where there's like so many subtle little things that you have to go on and repeatedly do or whatever, that could probably just get really annoying over time. But anyways, with that said, hopefully that covers most of this movie as I kind of backpedaled a little bit to cover any little things that happen in this film. There's probably a lot of dialogue that I just was like, no. Like I was like F the dialogue. I just want to kind of get these quick little moments. Let me know if there's something that I forgot about, because I'm sure there is. I try to kind of speedball through this review, because probably nobody is probably even, like, people might have heard of this movie, but eventually will it be popular? Probably not. And if it is, man, that is a massive surprise, because otherwise I think it's about that time for me to just get out here. So with that said, thank you for watching this review. I really do appreciate it. At the end of the day, you want to otherwise subscribe because you watched this whole thing. I would really appreciate that too. So, and if you are already subscribed, great. Thanks. Appreciate it. So with that said, I think I'm just going to get out of here. Yeah, like I feel that I've forgotten 8 billion things that this movie happens. So hopefully, if you don't see me in the next 2 seconds from now, it's probably because of the fact that I forgot about something. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.